Hey everyone, welcome back once again for another episode of the Blazer Metrics podcast. I am joined again from Cabo with our international man of mystery, TB Pup, aka Larry. Larry, thank you once again for joining.
It's a pleasure, It's do this. We're doing this in the morning. Typically, we do it in the evening, but I'll be honest, down here in the evening is that's kind of when things are going on. So I appreciate you being a little flexible. A lot to go over since the last time we were on here. I'm not sure we thought there would be a 3-game winning streak to discuss this early in the season, but yeah, let's get to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think maybe the last time we did a show, or maybe the time before, like I genuinely was like, when are we gonna get a win? Like, I mean, I know we talked about Memphis as being a possibility, and I had really thought Detroit was like, okay, this is another team that's kind of on the same level as us. They're young, their best player is young, and I was like, okay, I think maybe we could get a win there, but we looked so bad against Orlando that I was like, I don't know. I mean, we looked so bad against Orlando, and Orlando's not that good. So I'm surprised. I really am. I'm very surprised at the 3-game winning streak. I know it doesn't mean much because they're not really good teams, although Toronto did just spank the Bucks. But
there's a whole nother topic right there with what's going on with the Bucks.
Yeah, I know, and it's really tempting to talk about Dame and the Bucks, but I don't. Maybe at the end, you know what I mean. I think I want to focus on our team. I want to focus on our future.
I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. Yeah, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, other than the contrast in what looks like might be the team identity and how that's a little different, and how that identity has transferred a little bit over to the Bucks. Obviously, way more talent over there, but
I think they have a bad coach.
Let's get into the.
I think they have a bad coach. I think they're going to need to.
Yeah, I don't think that's helping. But there are some other things. There was a breakdown someone did on their defense and Dame's individual defense, and how it's historically bad. And they jumped right on it. This is not the friendly new Portland media for Dame. Somebody went into this and broke down how poor he has been, isolated it, identified him with some tracking video and some different things that had been going on here for years. But the honeymoon there is they won a championship. There's no room for growth, and so someone outlined it in nauseating detail on how bad he has been on defense and how it's affecting the rest of the team, even with really good defensive players around him. But now how Portland is a little scrappier, longer, more length, a little more defensive oriented, which they have to be because they can't shoot right now to save their lives.
Yeah.
But it's a very different team, and I think some of these things will start to play up as they mature a little bit, as they learn what they can and can't do, as they get a little more rhythm, as they get more of a feel for each other. So, yeah, do you want to start with the Detroit game? You're right. That's the one where we thought they maybe could get one at home. I think that was Orlando, but then the Detroit game is like, well, that's really the first one that we saw that we thought that they could potentially get. The Raptor game was a surprise. I'll be honest. I did not think they had a shot in that.
They played so badly, though. I mean, the Raptors couldn't hit the broadside of a barn in that game. So that definitely helped.
They could not, but you know what? There's some. When I went back and looked at that game, and the Raptors certainly missed some open shots, but the Blazers' length, at least in some part, makes those shots harder. Where they came out and shot the lights out, the Raptors did against the Bucks, because, and we talked about this for years, their first line of defense, and then the first probably perimeter player, is a shorter player who does not play defense, your looks are they're just better. You
Yeah,
look at the looks that the teams are getting against Portland now.
they're
Matisse
contested.
is out there bothering shots.
Yeah.
Kamara's all over the place. He is. There's your new starting small forward, I think, going forward. It's been lip service for Tease. You notice Kamara started the second half last night.
Yeah, T said that he thought that
He's a
was because
bother.
he's sick. Because so right now there's a cold that's running through the team, and Shaedon is actually, it's
Well, yeah,
amazing because he played
but
46 minutes, but he's you could hear it. He's definitely sick when he did the interview after. So
yeah, Sharpe's got it maybe the worst. There's some other guys that have it, but and maybe that's the case. It's sickness, but a number of them have it. But Kamara is just he does so many things that don't show up in the stat line, in rotation or causing someone to alter a shot or not even take one and kick it out. His closing ability, he's always knocking balls loose. He's always getting his hands, on loose balls. He's getting deflections. And even the shots, he was matched up a lot against Desmond Bain last night, who had 33 points or whatever. But those were
yeah,
not an easy 33 points. The shots that Bain got that he made, most of them were off of a rotation where Kamara wasn't so much in the vicinity. When Kamara was on him and was D'ing him up in a one-on-one or off a drive or something, he didn't shoot nearly as well. His makes were more off of kickouts and spot ups and some drives. He did get some, but Kamara made his life difficult when he was on him. So you look out there and you've got Ayton, who's long, mobile. Grant, good help defender, very long. Kamara, long. That's a lot of length. That's
and then
the
Sharp.
shortest wingspan of those three is. Well, yeah, but I mean, just your front line. The shortest wingspan is what, 7'2",
Yeah,
7'1", 7'2". Then you got Sharp, who's nearly a 7-foot wingspan.
that block he
And
had
now
was
instead
insane.
of
That block on Kennard
yeah,
was just
he was so turned around, and he even admitted that he got a little lost and just okay, there's the ball, I got to go get it and jump. And he didn't just tip it, he spiked it. He got
yeah.
that with a good portion of his hand. That wasn't just a fingertip. He could have even been a little farther away and still gotten that with how he closed and how quickly he elevated. So he's got nearly a 7-foot wingspan with ridiculous vertical, so it makes him even bigger. And now, whether you take out Dame or whether you take out Scoot, either one of them not a good defender now, and you put in Brogdon, who positionally is a much better defender. He doesn't have the length or the athleticism that any of the rest of those guys have, but he's a smart defender. All of a sudden, you have 4 to 5 good to very solid defenders on the court. And then when you come in with, if Matisse comes off the bench, or let's say he starts and Kamara off the bench, because Matisse is a good defender. That's an all
Yeah,
NBA defender.
that's really what he's good at. That's
So
kind of
you've got
it.
Tease, you've got Tease, you've got Jabari. He's a good defender. Tease is a good defender. And then so the weakest one out of your top 8 by far is Ant, and Ant is better this year. The effort is certainly better.
Well,
I
here's the
think
thing,
the
though.
execution will come, but he seems more active.
I think, and I know this kind of ties back to Dame, but the thing I never liked about Dame and CJ's approach to defense, and Dame even said this in the media day pressers, because they asked him, the media in Milwaukee asked him about his reputation as a bad defender and blah, 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 blah. And Dame kind of brushed it off and said, well, I was asked to carry, I'm paraphrasing, I'd have to go back and look up the actual quote, but essentially was like, I was asked to carry the offense in Portland, so I just didn't have the energy to play defense. That's essentially what his excuse has been for years, is that, well, I'm having to carry the load. And he and CJ both basically had that same attitude, and that permeated because of Terry Stotts. Terry never held them accountable on defense, ever. And so what does that do to your team when your best player and your second best player put in zero effort. And then so you have Anthony Simons, who has been one of, if not the worst defenders in the league for the past few years. And he came up in the school of Damian Lillard.
He came up under that.
And so I think, having this is why I am so torn, Larry, because on the one hand, I see Brogdon and I see Grant and I see even Williams to an extent and Thibault, and I'm like, man, we could really get some assets for these guys, especially Brogdon. We could flip him at the deadline to a playoff team for at least an unprotected first. I mean, at least minimum, and maybe more, because I think a lot of teams this season looks very wide open. So a lot of teams are going to be like, man, Brogdon could get us over the hump, or Grant could get us over the hump, but at the same time, what I absolutely love and what I really think, I don't put a lot of credence behind these wins, but what I love about them, it's not even that we won. It's that Brogdon and Williams and Thibault and Ayton, they bring the effort.
Williams out of that earlier.
Yeah, I know. And Williams is a fantastic defender. And, so having these veterans on the court that are like, no, I'm here's Brogdon, who's been asked to really kind of carry the offense at times, but he's still putting an effort on defense all the time. So having that is huge, because it sets the tone. And what I'll say about Scoot is that, yes, he is not a very good defender right now, but he tries. He's putting in effort, maybe too much effort, because he's getting fouls, because it's like he wants to show that he's a defender. So yeah, I mean, it's
right. But that's perfect. He is trying. You see more effort out of Ant, I think, and because Ant sees it around from everyone else. From he may be the longest tenured here, but he's not the oldest. But when you see it out of the rest of the team, and Brogdon's great for that. There is more effort from him. We'll see how much the execution can be, because we've talked about he's not real strong. He's fairly slight. I mean, if he's playing shooting guard, he's pretty undersized. And Scoot is trying, but the rest of those guys, and I don't know how I left Robert Williams III off of that earlier list of guys coming off the bench that are good defenders. This has the ability, as some of these younger players transition in and get more comfortable, to be not just an average, a well above average, I would think, defensive team. When you have the guys Williams and Ayton and Grant and Thibault and Kamara and Brogdon and Tease and Jabari, and I mean, there's a lot of length and a lot of defensive acumen, and you see that. This is almost the way that Portland played last night was almost Grizzly-like of the last few years, that ground and pound. It's not pretty. They're not getting out on the break. They don't shoot well. They attack the rim, and they're playing good defense, and it's for such a young team. You're like, well, it's funny. The Blazers are ahead of the Heat in the standings, which I'm sorry. That will be good all year long.
We're ahead of a lot of teams. It's crazy. We're in the middle of the pack right now in the league. That's not going to hold, but and then just kind of going off of the whole effort thing, I want to highlight something. Jeremy Grant is averaging almost 5 rebounds a game this season. And in the last 3 games...
Career high.
Which is crazy.
Credit where credit is due. Career high.
And in the last 3 games, his rebound numbers are... Well, he didn't actually do very well against Detroit, but he had 6 against Toronto and 8 last night. So it's like, he's rebounding now. I mean, everybody... That was his biggest knock, was like, Grant can't rebound to save his life. And... I think that level of effort, because he hasn't, and so he's bringing it. One thing I wanted to ask you about specifically about this 3-game winning streak, because I'm curious what your thoughts are. the foul shot discrepancy is insane. I honestly, it's not sustainable. So against Detroit, it was, let's see here. It was, they only shot 11 attempts and we shot 33. We missed 6. We were 27 of 33 in that game. And then last night,
outstanding.
Last night against, really a more, I don't know, maybe not more veteran. It's kind of hard to say. I think that they're probably pretty close to us in terms of like veteran versus young guys. But last night we shot 36 to only 13.
13.
So Grant got 9. Grant did not shoot well from the free throw line. He was 5 of 9.
Right.
But he's attacking the rim. Brogdon shot 10 of 12, which is a lot. Sharpe has been going to the line a lot. He had 7 last night. I don't think it's sustainable. Like, I just don't see us getting these calls against a veteran team. But it's just crazy. Like, I don't remember us ever, as a team, getting that many more free throw attempts than our opponents.
Well, I think there's a couple reasons for this. So let's go to the other teams not getting a lot of free throws. This goes right back to defensively, they are better. Now, let's be honest, Scoot not playing makes them better on defense because he's just not there yet. Not effort, learning curve, all that stuff. But they're better. This is a better version of the team with Brogdon starting than Scoot. Doesn't mean when Scoot comes back he doesn't start, because long term for the franchise that's what has to happen, and he's going to have to go through his growing pain. But that defense they're not reaching as much. They're longer. It's challenge. They're able to challenge shots without reaching. They're rotating better. They're just guarding better in space. Kamara does not get beat a whole lot. Tease doesn't get beat. Brogdon plays. I mean, there's so many guys that fouls are because you're out of position or you're trailing or you're lazy or there's a number of things that go into that. That just isn't happening in a way that is so foreign for what we've been used to for 10 years. And that's not an all Dame thing. There's all sorts of Dame and CJ thing. And you go down the list.
Yeah.
It's a culture thing, and this is a different identity. And I have not been a huge Chauncey fan, but maybe now this is finally more his type of team, and he can get some of these things to work. And he's got some pieces to play better defense, so they're not fouling as much, so they're not going to the line. The part that's not sustainable, I think, for Portland is because they're shooting so poorly from the outside. They're catching teams in some rotations, and I think teams are going to start sagging off of the Blazers more, packing the paint more, and taking away some of those driving lanes.
Oh, they are.
So they're trying. Not going to get as many. They're trying, but part of what there's two things I think that are negating that, even as teams pack it in. One, Andre Miller 2.0 just creates fouls. He's herky-jerky. He's not really quick. I mean, hopefully Scoot is watching this going, I don't need to go 900 miles an hour to get an open shot, because the slowest guy on the court is getting open time and time and time again from footwork and change of pace. So Brogdon is creating some of those on his own. Then Sharpe creates them just by athleticism. Mm-hmm. There isn't a spot there except for those uber elite athletes where he just it's like, okay, I can guard 9 guys out of 10 in this league, but this guy just out elevated me, and so instead of blocking the shot, I hit him on the arm.
But he's not afraid of contact either.
Even as things get tight.
Sharpe is like
he's not.
He's great at, it's almost like he's like a running back that's good at finding holes through the line, because he finds these lanes. He kind of just slips in, and the other team, connects with him and bumps him, but he's so strong and so big for a shooting guard that he just kind of absorbs the contact and still can finish. It's crazy. He's quite a beast in the
So
paint.
This is not out of transition where they're getting fouls going to the basket, because they're transition wise, they're as slow as they've ever been. This
Yeah,
is
we're
not
not
them
running like
getting
they
out and
said.
running.
Yeah.
No, this is in the half court offense where they're getting, they're starting to get more lobs to Williams and Ayton, or at least attempt them, which creates shots around the rim, and so then when they do get some kick out threes, as teams just pack the paint. I mean, Sharp had one last night, had a couple last night, but one in particular, there was no one within 15 feet of him when he shot the ball. He was so wide open because everyone had completely collapsed the paint. And then the other reason they're getting, I think, free throws is because they're rebounding well on the offensive end. And so Ayton, Grant a little more, Jabari Parker anytime he's in the game, Kamar's knocking some balls loose. So they're getting some second attempts, which have a higher rate of getting fouled, I believe. I don't know what the breakdown
That's another
stats-wise
huge difference is the rebounding. I mean, we were a horrible rebounding team last year. Just terrible. And this year, I mean, Ayton is largely responsible, but Williams and Walker and Kamar, and Sharp, they just stay after it. Like, they're just attacking those boards, which is such a refreshing thing to see. But I will say this, in terms of the shooting, I think we're going to bounce back because some of our guys are shooting way below their averages. Grant is only shooting 28% from three right now, which is so far below his average. Brogdon's at 35, he's usually closer to 40%. I think Sharp's at
44 last year.
Yeah, Sharp's at 30, almost 38%, which is really good. I mean, I think he'll stay around that. But Kamara is only shooting 21%, which I think that'll come up a little bit. Walker's shooting 40.
I think Kamara's will come up. Pieces will come up. He's been and honestly, Scoot, when he gets back in there, his can only come on.
Yeah.
It can only go one direction.
Yeah.
So I think eventually maybe Ayton starts taking a few. He's got such good touch. I don't know what his percentage is. He's always shot a really good percentage, but you watch him and when it comes out of his hands, it's just always got a good chance of going in. And
his 2-point percentage is 60%. So
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, my only complaint about him is he's kind of got butterfingers. A few times, Scoot and Shaedon have been really good at getting him the ball in the paint, in scoring position. And Scoot, that's the one thing that I'm really kind of sad about. Is that
still need to get it.
Scoot was really starting to develop some chemistry with him, in that game against Detroit. And so having him go out kind of stinks because he was really the best guard right now at getting Ayton the ball on lobs or, getting into the paint and feeding him when he was close to the basket. But I've seen Ayton fumble the ball a few times when it's like right in his lap. Like it's right there in the numbers. And it's like, dude, you got to hold on to that. I don't know if he's surprised. He's shocked that he's getting the ball, but that's my only complaint is that he really has kind of an issue with fumbling the ball in the paint in scoring position.
Well, and he does, but also the Blazer guards need to do a better job of getting him the ball up higher. Sharp had one last night. Great drive, found Ayton. He was open. He got the ball, but he hit him down by his waist. Mm-hmm. So it gave whoever the guard was a chance to knock it loose or kind of strip it as he started to go up.
Yeah.
That ball needs to be higher because it should have been an easy conversion. It wasn't a bad pass. It needs to just be higher. So you take out those little guys. They don't even have a chance, and it's a quick turn and a high finish. So I think they'll get better with that.
They'll learn.
Back to the shooting is, he'll learn, but there's a bunch of guys that I think you're right that are going to get better with some repetition, just feeling a little more comfortable because this is such a young team. Now, some of those guys, Matisse is assisted at maybe one of the highest rates in the NBA. So if he doesn't get a wide open look from a kick out like he was getting from Dame, he's not going to shoot it well. And it was in the corner too that he was good. So his shots are a little different this year, and he's not getting quite the space. I think eventually that will come with Scoot, but it's not there yet. Scoot's got to figure things out to not be a walking turnover so that he can be on the court more, not foul so much, and make some of the good passes that he can. Because some of his passes off a drive when he gets into a lane, or some of these hook or wraparound passes that are, you know, 10, 15, sometimes 20 feet, um, he's spotting those guys and he's getting them good looks. It's just not happening often enough now. And as that happens more often, I think Tease's percentage will go up. Grant lived off of that last year. His percentage will go up. Neither one of those guys is creating a shot for themselves out at the 3-point line. Well, and just, like Scoot can't either. I mean, he's better as a spot up, even though that's been really bad. So I think that those will come, and as they do, or as they keep attacking the rim and teams keep packing it in, they're going to get more open shots. They're just going to have to knock them down. And part of that gets helped when Ant gets back as well.
Yeah, I mean, Grant is just offensively is terrible right now, and that's got to improve because he has a 2-point, his field goal percentage is 38%, and his 3-point percentage is 28%, and it's just that's terrible. I mean, that's got to come up. There's no way, but he's also forcing things a lot right now, and I think as Scoot improves and gets more comfortable, I think Grant won't feel, especially with Sharpe kind of taking a step forward, I don't think Grant's going to feel like he needs to do those forced ISO charge into the paint, frustrating takes that everybody's just been going nuts over. He's getting foul shots, which is great, but like they're just not good moves, and he's not passing, and that's why so many people have been frustrated.
Well, I think part of that is there's a bit of it probably that he feels is out of necessity, because especially when Scoot was in there, they're not running offense efficiently. So you notice that plays will break down, and players end up going one-on-one because they're just not getting much out of their offensive sets. So Grant is doing that more, certainly more than he did last year, and that's just maybe not his strong suit. You see Brogdon doing it a ton just out of necessity because Scoot wasn't getting them good shots. Shea's handle is, we talked about that, maybe a little better, but that still needs work to actually really create. For as athletic as he is, there's sometimes he should, be able to cross over and just blow by somebody and just yam on him, and that's just not happening because that's still a little loose. So their offense is getting bogged down, which contributes to their pace. It's really slow, and it ends up with an ISO of Brogdon, Grant, Ayton sometimes when he does, a few times he gets the ball. Shaedon's done it, and he's doing it because he's so athletic. So he's like, okay, well, now I'm just going to go towards the basket and jump up in the air and try and create something. But as Brogdon's, the starter, maybe another game or so, when Scoot comes back in, they're gonna struggle with some of that for a while, and I think you're gonna see more ISOs until they get more efficient and Scoot becomes more comfortable, because they're just not at that place. Some of the best looks they've gotten outside of Brogdon are honestly when Mays is in there. He's Brogdon-esque. He's not real quick, but he's good at getting the ball to guys in spots, taking advantage of some things. I mean, he's your emergency and break in case of glass point guard, but they're not efficient on offense, and that's why you get so much of this ISO.
It's crazy though. Shaedon's usage percentage is only 22%, whereas Grant is at 26.4 and Brogdon's at 28.7. So, which makes sense because he has the ball in his hands a lot. But just looking at some of these statistics are just, Shaedon's playing really well this year. For a second-year player who's only 20 years old, he is, I don't know how, I'm always kind of like these statistics. It's like which ones are the best and how much value should you put into them. But Shaedon actually has a positive value above replacement player, 0.2. And then Brogdon's also at 0.2, and Ayton is at 0.3. Those are our three best players right there. Shaedon has a 1.2 box plus minus. Brogdon's at 3, and Ayton is at 3.9. It's funny. I know that the Suns fans were declaring victory after one game, and they were taking their laps. And Ayton is having a very good year already so far. I mean, I know he has his warts.
He's rebounding.
His rebounding is insane. He's playing really good defense. I mean, his defensive rating per 100 possessions, his defensive rating is 98, which is actually better than Williams is at 100.
Wow.
So his offensive rating is at 121. Our two centers are fantastic. I am so happy with. I mean, it's so funny because when you and I did that podcast like 3 or 4 months ago, and we talked about Cronin. And everybody was on the Cronin hate wagon back then, and we went through all of his moves, and we were like, I think Joe is pretty good, and that was before he had his opus. He pulled off this amazing summer in August and September, and right now our center rotation is the best in the league. There's no way anybody's better than this because we've got Ayton at 121 offensive rating, 98 defensive rating, and then Robert Williams is 122 offensive rating and 100 defensive rating.
That is insanely good for centers. I mean, not one, let alone two. So that is tremendously helping. Ayton is what, the second best rebounder in the league? I think he
was tied for first, but I think he probably dropped a little bit. But yeah, he was tied. I think he was tied for first, and then last night he didn't put up quite as many rebounds.
It's 1-2 with Sabonis. I think it's where he was. But his efficiency in terms of converting is really high. His defense has been just, I mean, a godsend and combine that with Williams. It's like, oh, all right, this is not as they all come. There's a reason he was available. There's some things he doesn't do as well. You talked about his hands. Like him to be a little more aggressive at times. He doesn't dunk as much as I would like for someone that's as athletic and as long as he is. But what you don't get out of him that frustrated the heck out of Blazer fans for years is you don't get the flip shot. You don't get the flip. Just you get it out of my hands, lay in, just throw it up towards the basket. He takes his time, maybe a little jumper, turn around, his little jump hook. He's really good with those. So while he may not be dunking at a high rate, unless it's off a lob, he's converting at a high rate, which I'm fine. As long as the ball's going in the basket, it's kind of minuscule to pick at, especially when their efficiency, the offense and defense is that good. I mean, that's insanely good.
Well, and then he's also been really good, especially last night. I think 2 or 3 times he gets an offensive rebound and just immediately puts it back in. Like, I mean, his follow is quick. He gets it and just flips it back in. And he probably had 4 or 6 points just off of that last night. But here's some more stats. So I know some people like box plus minus. Shaedon is currently at a 1.2, which he's one of the only guys with a positive. Brogdon's at 3, Ayton's at 3.9, and Williams is at 1.9. And those are like kind of the 4 guys right now that are really killing it. And just to really highlight Shaedon's improvement, so Shaedon and Ant both were terrible defenders last year. I mean, they were around the 120, 123 defensive rating. Shaedon's now at a 112. His offensive rating is a little bit low. His offensive rating is 115, which is low for him. But yeah, that's better than average. And it's better
than average. And that's all you can ask out of a kid that young is to improve. And if he's above average, which is there's a whole lot of guys on this team. One more thing about Ayton, you talked about his rebounds. He's also a better passer than I expected him to be. Now it's not facilitating passing like Nurk's the better facilitator passer. There's hands down. But Ayton makes good passes that lead to other things, and they're solid pass. He had a kick out last night, I think it was to Shaedon, and in a bunch of traffic, and he's just so tall and long, and he zipped it and on the money, and it created a wide open shot, and I think they got a 3 out of it. But regardless, it was the right play, and that's what I see out of a lot of what's going on now. Their efficiency isn't great with some of the things that they do, but they're trying to do the right thing, or they're starting to do the right thing, and maybe the execution all the way through isn't perfect, but they're looking to make the right pass. They're more often. They're looking to make the right play. You see signs that it's not pretty right now, but it's like, okay, I can work with that. You can build on that. Where before it's like there's nothing to build, and nothing's getting any better. It's the same old, same old. This has at least good foundation to where, as they get more continuity, as younger players get more experience, they get used to playing with each other. Scoot gets used to the speed of the game. They're starting to play the right way, and I think good things will come from that down the road. Now, I'm not getting hyped by any 3-game win streak. I expect that to turn around fairly quickly. One, the teams they've beat over this core. I mean, Memphis, regardless of what they've been in the past, is winless so far. They're 0-5 or whatever they are.
Yeah.
Detroit's not a good team, and the Raptors are I know what the Raptors have been for a long time, just mediocre-ish. It depends on the night you catch them. So, but it's a win. And for this team, you take anything you can get because of how young they are. It's good for their experience. It's good for them to see wins, even just in plays on the court. Tamani got really excited about a defensive play. I'm not sure if it was last night of the Detroit game where he did the right thing all the way through, stayed with somebody, didn't go for up fakes. Then he tried to do an up and under. He stayed with them, didn't get a block, maybe got a deflection, and I think maybe there was a 24-second shot clock violation. And you saw him get pumped up. He kind of, and he's not super vocal, but you could tell he was happy about that play win, that specific win right there. And they're doing those things. They're having some fun, and they know they're not good, but they're it's almost like they're so young to not know any better. It's like outside of Brogdon and Grant, and it's pretty fun to watch, and also to see Sharpe not only want to take over, but teammates almost deferring to him. In the Detroit game, there was some of that in the Toronto game. And last night, even in the fourth quarter, I don't know that he scored, but the ball was in his hands and he created things that led to something else, or almost like the hockey assist that led to something else.
Chauncey was actually mad at him.
Then he hits.
Chauncey was mad at him. He in his post-game presser, he was like, Shaedon passed up some shots. He's like, we worked to get him some matchups, and he did not. So Shaedon is still kind of working into that, kind of as the go-to guy at times, being comfortable taking advantage of matchups. And this is where I think Scoot and Shaedon just still have a lot of learning to do, is they're not there yet with reading what the other team is doing. And I know they're going to get there because Sharpe has grown in leaps and bounds just in the last year. And then Scoot, you can already see the improvement. Scoot, from the first 3 games to the second 2 games, he looked 100% better. And that's still because the bar was so low and Scoot was so bad in the first few games that him being 100% better is still pretty bad. But but he's improving, and that's all I want to see. And that's really kind of what you were saying. I just want to see us compete. It would have been a very long season if every game was a 20-point blowout. And that would not be good for the mental health of the team. It would not be good for the development of the players. And so having games where we can compete, and yeah, you're right. Memphis is not good. Detroit is still young and not very good.
So much.
Toronto is just not constructed very well, and I think they're good enough to beat any team because they have so much length. But they're like Neil O'Shea, but like in an alternate universe where they only draft forwards. So it's like the team just doesn't have the balance that they need, but they're good enough to beat anyone.
They're missing a point guard.
Although Schroeder's played pretty well for them, but still, it's like they're just, I don't know, that Masai Ujiri, I don't think he's going to be there very long.
He's a back.
But with that said, I just want to see us compete against teams that are kind of at the same level of it. We're going to get schooled by the Clippers and the Celtics and the Bucks and these teams that are clearly at that next level that are going to compete for a championship. We'll get killed by the Warriors but I just want to see us compete against the Rockets and the Grizzlies and these other teams that are just young or not very good, because that just shows like, hey, we're building something. We're cooking. We're not tanking. We're not intentionally trying to lose games. And just in a matter of 5-6 games, we've seen huge improvements with this roster. So I think, yeah, it's going to be a rough year. We'll probably still lose, 60 games or something like that. But I just want to see us compete. I want to see our guys grow and improve and show effort. And so I guess a question that I have for you, because this is something I've been kind of kicking around on the forum, is what do you do with the veterans? Because the Rockets just went out and spent like $60+ million to bring in Van Vliet and Brooks, because to essentially do what Brogdon and Williams and Thibault and Grant are doing for us. Because they tried that. They tried playing that. We're all young guys. We're just a young, inexperienced team, and it was a nightmare. So, I mean, where do you fall on this? Because I'm so torn right now, because I think having Brogdon and Grant and Thibault, I don't want to trade Williams. I actually really like Williams. I think we have a fantastic center rotation. I don't want him to go. It would have to be an absolute sweetheart of a deal. But Brogdon, more specifically Brogdon and Grant.
Well, and that's, so you hit on it. It's what would we get back? I don't think they're giving any of these guys away. But as you get closer to the deadline or January or something, and some of these teams need, whatever their needs are, or injuries, you've got guys that, and we talked about this a little bit before, Brogdon and Williams, that can come off the bench and be a very big boost to a playoff type team. They're not going to upset anything. Team's already good, but this will really add to them. So it's literally going to be, what are we going to get out of it? If we don't get something great, we'll keep them, and at least for a little while longer, and mentor some of these players. What you don't want is for them to take up so many minutes as they get, as it gets going, that it's taking away development minutes from Scoot. And I mean, the minutes are there right now because Ant is out,
and Scoot,
and now Scoot's out. He'll come back, and so some of the guys' minutes go down, and Mays won't play anymore. But it's when Ant comes back that there's a log jam. And so, okay, what are we going to do with that? Is Ant enough of a veteran that we can move Brogdon and we're still going to be solid enough? I think that's something you have to take into consideration. You can't have all four. You can't have, and you don't want Shaedon at small forward. He's your starting shooting guard for the next 10, 12 years.
And then there goes your defense, because as well as Sharpe is doing, that's at shooting guard. And that's where he has an advantage in size and length. And you put him at small forward, and first of all, you're taking minutes then away from Kamara. I don't really care as much about Thibault, but like, I just, yeah, I, I hate it. I don't want to go back to
I wouldn't.
the
I
Dame
wouldn't be so.
CJ Norm situation. You know?
Right. So I think Kamara's development will help keep Shaedon. As funny as that sounds for a guy that's coming off the bench, I think that keeps Shaedon at two, which then it's like, okay, it's Scoot Ant when he comes back and Sharp, and that's why I think Brogdon eventually, even though he's a really good influence on this team and a veteran, I think you get something for him and he moves on. Grant, as long as they're just as long as he's engaged and wants to be here, I think they keep him for a while. I mean, he's like the oldest guy. You got to have one. And Williams is in a perfect situation because he doesn't have to play super long minutes, which keeps him from being injured, and he can be an incredibly highly effective player. Now, the exact type of player that some other team's going to want. So if that comes to where, okay, well, we can't turn this down because of what we're going to get, okay, but if not, you keep those guys and keep going. I think Brogdon is probably the most likely, just because there's just not enough minutes for Scoot to develop, for Shaedon to take on. I would love to see what Shaedon's numbers are as a starter versus coming off the bench, because
Yeah.
obviously last year as a starter it was in didn't count, but now that they are counting, he seems to thrive in that. It just it's a much better place for him. And so if that's honestly when they come back, is it Anton Sharp and Scoot comes off the bench? I think that might
Might
help him a
happen.
little bit. Now, too
Yeah.
bad Ant's out for as long as he is. And Scoot will be back, but maybe Scoot comes off the bench for a little bit with Brogdon until he just gets a little more comfortable. The game slows down for him, and maybe he gets moved and Sharp Ant starts. And I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. I just know four guys. There's no way you can give them the minutes
No.
without moving Sharp to small forward, and that's just it's not where his best spot. So don't do it.
No, and then you're putting him in a position to fail because like yeah, he's about the same size as Thibault, but Thibault is such a good defender that he can play that position because he understands how to play that position defensively. And then Kamara is just so good. You want to give him minutes, and I think he will be starting by the end of the year. I don't see because Thibault's just not well. The big thing right now is Kamara has to start hitting his shots, and he also
Right.
he passes up
If he can,
he
if he can
passes up a
start
lot of
knocking that
shots.
down,
I've watched him. He'll get an open look and
because he
he
doesn't have the
hesitates.
confidence.
Yeah, he does not have the confidence. That is what's going to separate him because Thibault will shoot it. He's not been great, but he will shoot it. When he's open, he pulls the trigger, and Kamara does not. Kamara has to be like really open to pull the trigger, and I think he's just afraid of like making a mistake right now. But
Right.
I think the guy that I would love to trade is Grant. He's 29. He's making a lot of money. He plays selfish. Yes, he's improved his rebounding and his defense is good. He can hit open shots, but I think he's going to be harder to trade as he ages and his contract continues to go up. I think if you can find a taker for him this year, he's the one that I would really lean towards getting rid of. I mean, his stats are terrible. I think they're going to even out, but his stats are terrible right now. I just don't know. I think if you can get a pick and a player or something, I don't know, because you could start. But what does that do to our depth, though, right? So, because if Kamara's in the small forward rotation, then you have Walker. Murray just doesn't seem at all ready for minutes. So I don't know what that does to the power forward rotation.
But we wouldn't have one unless we got someone back in a in some type of deal where it was a younger excuse me type player. So honestly, Memphis.
Memphis needs size for
Excuse me.
sure.
I think he could help out Memphis, and maybe we get Clark and something else out of it. I don't know. Utah maybe. Actually, there's quite a few teams I think that could use Grant because he can play defense, he can score. He's being asked to do some things that he's just not good at right now because the Blazers aren't good and they don't. But put him with a better point guard and a more established roster, and he's fine. He's playing a little bit outside of his.
He's not a number one
Out of
option.
his
He just isn't. He should
wheel.
be like
No,
a number
he's
three.
not. He's probably a 3.
Yeah, I think I'm almost leaning to just, unless like we said, unless there's just a really good offer at the deadline, just riding it out this season, because the draft next year is very forward heavy, and
Right.
I think trying to get, whether it's Holland or Edwards or Sarr, depending on how high the draft pick is, if you're the number one pick. I honestly don't know who's the number one pick right now. I mean, there's a few guys that are candidates, but there are so many guys that could potentially either be a small forward or a power forward, part-time center that we might end up drafting, and that's gonna drastically affect our rotation. So that's why I would be opposed to trading Simons, because what I would want for Simons is a young forward, and I don't. If that's who's there in the draft, then we don't need that. So I kind of think Cronin might want to just ride it out and see what happens in the draft and see who we end up with, and then kind of maneuver what we have, because Brogdon has another year on his contract. So next summer he's going to probably be just as desirable as he is right now. Grant will be 30, and we really need his stats to be better. I think we're gonna keep Williams unless there's just an insanely good deal. I think Thibel's too hard to trade because he has a no trade clause and a trade kicker. So I don't see him getting moved this year. Maybe next summer.
I can see him ending up in Dallas whenever the limitation comes off, because I think Dallas is the one that signed him.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be shocked if in this summer that's where he ends up. He ends up in Dallas, and his kicker gets waived or something to make that deal.
Yeah.
So it sounded like he wanted to go there. They wanted to have him. They're playing better to start this year than I thought they would. I could see him go. I don't know if it's a full year that he has to wait, or if it's
I don't remember what the
deadline.
rule is.
I'm not sure where a team has made the offer and then it gets matched.
Well, it took us a year, to trade.
But I could.
What was it for Crab? We did ultimately send him to Brooklyn, but it was like a year or so later.
Right. And so it may be, and I don't know if this is a little bit different CBA, but he might have to wait a year, but I could see him going there. I mean, there's some other places that could use him, but it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up with the team that offered him eventually, because Kamara is going to take this spot. He's just, if he gets to where he can knock down an open shot at all and get some confidence, which I think it will come. He's a hard worker. He's a smart guy. He's wanting to do so well right now that he's deferring, because he's like, oh, right now Sharpe or Brogdon or Grant or somebody else has got a better chance of making this shot than I do, so he's giving it up, and he's just going to have to get through that. Chauncey's going to have to empower him to, listen, to stay on the floor, you're doing all the dirty work stuff, but I need you to hit a shot once in a while so it's not 4-on-5 when you're out there, which is kind of how it is right now when Scoot's out there. Teams are just leaving him alone and saying, hey, fire it up until you can make it. We're packing the paint. It's almost instead of a box and one, it's a man. It's 4 guys playing man and 1 guy playing zone.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I would really love Joe to go out and get at some point in the next year or so, is just a knockdown shooter. And I know Simons is a good shooter, but Simons isn't what I'm talking about. I want a JJ Redick, the kind of guy that just you can.
You want You want Seth Curry,
Yeah, I want somebody that runs off
a Seth Curry
screens
type.
and can spot up and is always moving and somebody that the other team has to be worried about because Simons is good as a on ball. He's a guy that has to have the ball in his hands. He's a good shooter, but he's not what I'm talking about. I want somebody that you could throw out there that is just going to punish teams. They have to constantly be worried about them, where they are, what are they doing? They're moving around. They're trying to get open. That's what I would love to pick up, and I don't know who that would
A
be.
little bit like was it Detroit? Joe Harris was doing that for Detroit. He used to do it for
Joe
the
Harris,
Nets, I
exactly,
think.
exactly.
Joe,
That's exactly what I'm talking
a
about.
Joe Harris type where you just cannot leave him because
Yep,
he's going to hurt you. Now he might not do a lot of other things, but you have to account for him. And yes,
yep.
there's absolutely a spot for that on this team, not only because they don't shoot well, but just to help out so it clears the lane for some of what the rest of the team is wanting to do, which is drive the ball to the basket, which is why they're shooting free throws at such a high. I mean, it's they're causing damage and they're playing defense well enough that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's the huge makeup for the lack of shooting that they have on the other end, both from the 3-point line and they're not converting from a high rate inside the arc outside of Eaton.
Yeah. So that we just don't have that on the team right now, and I don't. That's even though Sharpe's not a bad 3-point shooter, and Simons is a good 3-point shooter, and Brogdon's a good 3-point shooter. That's not what they do. I want a 3-point specialist, somebody that can just bomb away, and the other team has to constantly. So just like Joe Harris, that's a great example. That's exactly what I'm thinking of. And that's not somebody you're going to start. That's somebody you bring off the bench that can come in and and just kind of be someone that they have to account for. And I think that would really help Scoot because Scoot is great at knowing where guys are and finding that open man. And so I think I would love to see Joe go out and find that this summer. I don't know who it would be, but I would love to see it.
Honestly, if I think you mentioned Shaedon shooting 38% or something from three. If he can maintain that or even get that up a tick or more, that's causing teams havoc because they can't go under because he's shooting well and he's really starting to read this better too. When someone goes under, he's kind of stepping back towards the way he came from, which is creating a tremendous amount of open space and just shooting it. I mean, it's just a very soft flick of the wrist.
Mm-hmm.
It's effortless. So you can't go under. And if you go over, now he's downhill going towards the basket. And athletically, it's creating a little more of a straight line drive. He doesn't have to beat someone off with a dribble. And because he is so athletic, that's causing problems. And that's some of where they're getting free throws because even if it's not him, it's taking that shot. Now teams are out of rotation. And so if you get it, he kicks it out to whomever, Brogdon or Grant or whatever, and now they're attacking again downhill because they're not shooting it from the outside. They're still attacking downhill, but they're attacking downhill against a rotated defense, and that's creating fouls, and that's why they're getting to the line. So Sharpe isn't necessarily taking that shot. He's not maybe getting to the foul line on some of those drives, but he's creating offensive opportunities for teammates that is getting them some of those foul shots. He gets much better from three at 20 years old. I mean, this is unfathomable to think of. He's going to be a nightmare. He just has to figure out how much of a nightmare that will be because he talked about, we talked about the block at the end of the game. He got lost. He goes, I lost my guy. I just kind of turned around and jumped. Like, yeah, but you lost your guy and he was, I don't know, 10, 12 feet away. Sharpe had kind of pinched down on the guy in the lane and got turned around. They kicked it out. He just took a step or two and jumped and just launched himself. He starts to figure this out, and obviously that was on the defensive end, but he starts to figure more of this out on offense, where the ability that he has and what he can do with that, and if he can, even stay at 38, fine, that's good enough. But if he can get that to 39, 40, that's a problem, and that's going to make his teammates better in a hurry. Somebody's going to have to come help more often. And he's already starting to get the superstar treatment where teams are double teaming him hard, 25 feet from the basket. Okay, now you're 4-on-3. It's figure out how to get that ball to someone else who can maybe make a decision, whether that's Ayton or Kamar or whoever, and get a good shot. And they're going to be open shots, and guys are just going to have to knock them down. That's already coming at 20. That teams are having to play him like that on the defensive end. That's huge. That is so big for the development of the rest of these guys.
Yep.
For him to have that's special to watch, win or lose.
So Larry, I've got to wrap it up because I've got to take the little one to dance class. I will leave you with this interesting little comparison. So I was curious. I looked up Dame. So comparing Dame to Shaedon right now, Dame is like basically a net neutral because his offensive rating is 120, but his defensive rating is 120. And his offensive box plus minus is 2.9, and his defensive box plus minus is 2.9. So right now, Dame is a 0.1 box plus minus, whereas Shaedon is a 1.2. So right now, Shaedon and then value above replacement, Shaedon is 0.2, Dame is 0.1. So right now, I know it's a small sample size, but Shaedon is outplaying Dame.
Let's not get too far.
Let's not get too far. But it is funny. It's very funny. So
but real quick, and you see this in how their respective teams, the Blazers, offensively have plummeted from last year. They're not nearly as good on the offensive end, obviously. Defensively, they are much better. Look at Milwaukee. Offensively, okay. Defensively, they're terrible. I mean, they've completely flip-flopped. And Dame is, I mean, he's a huge presence. He's an incredible offensive player. He's a veteran. He's a leader. He's clutch. All that. Don't take away anything from him. But there's an identity that he has taken from Portland that is now gone to Milwaukee, and you see both teams have flip-flopped from what they were year before. Now, Milwaukee's going to figure that out. They got too much talent not to. But you see that in Portland. Defensively, they have really improved. Offensively, they're brutal because Dame was so good. Just how much can they get better on that end of the court? Because defense comes every night. That's something, if you can do that, that shows up whether your offense is there or not. So it will be interesting to see going forward. But we're seeing growth, and that's what you and I, that was this whole year is okay, where's their improvements going to be? And you're already seeing little bits and pieces of those.
But Joe really just screwed him by trading Holiday to Boston because Boston looks good, and it's going to be...
Well, and why?
Defense.
Because Jrue Holiday plays both sides of the court at an efficient level on offense, not nearly the volume, and very good on defense. Guess what? Defense matters when you're that good, when you get to that level, and then when you get to the playoffs, it matters. Boston looks great, and Joe did a tremendous job out of that. So I know you've got to run.
I do have to run.
But I'll be here for a couple of podcasts from the Blazer Metrics Southern Command Center. So
well, enjoy the weather. It is nasty up here right now. It is really blustery outside. So enjoy the beaches and the sun because it's definitely not sunny up here.
I won't turn my camera that way.
Yeah, it's good old Oregon November weather. So all right, sir. Well, thank you very much for joining. Thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Blazer Metric Podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate, review, all those great things, and we will see you all again soon.